Hello, my name is Ryan, and I want to talk about why I would be an excellent addition to any public relations team. I'll be talking about a crisis communication plan I've recently created, but first I want to give some background information. I've been working in customer services since I started working. I know what it's like to be yelled at by a customer for circumstances beyond my control. I've had to be patient yet firm, and in past roles, my people skills have often aided me in helping find common ground, assuring customers, and building trust. I took all of those skills and was able to work to create Shasta College's new crisis communication plan. I'll talk a little bit about that now. Shasta College as a whole does have an emergency operations plan, which is maintained by the Campus Safety Office, but with the growth of student body and staff at the college, as well as the growth of study abroad opportunities, I want to make sure that the Global Education Center had its own crisis communication plan. So my first step was research. I wanted to see what other smaller community colleges, or just colleges in general, had used for their crisis communication plan. In addition, much of the structure and framework of my crisis communication plan was created using the best practices from the manual created by the United States Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They have a manual entitled Crisis and Emergency Risk Communication. I also use an array of online sources. I have a table of contents, of course, to help guide the reader through, let them know the different sections as well as where to find them. In the introduction and the purpose, so the point of these two is just to introduce the reader to the Global Education Center. Since this is something that could be published on our website, perhaps not everyone is familiar with what the role is, and so I just wanted to make sure this helped clarify that, as well as clarify the purpose behind creating the crisis communication plan. The next section is all about potential threats. And so these are kind of broken up into a couple different areas. So I wanted to first look at threats to our students and student body, since these would be the main people participating in the programs at the Global Education Center, as well as threats to the institution as a whole. So Shasta College, as well as the Global Education Center. The next section talks about defining roles and, of course, the establishment of a joint information center. And so this would be, the joint information center would be created to pool resources and staff. And what I did here is just looked at the current organizational structure of the college, and I even put a link to it here so it's easy to see. But basically, I went through and looked at who currently does what, who works in which office, and assigned roles depending on who would be the best suited and most able to perform each of the required roles. So for example, the public information officer, we have a marketing department and the head of marketing, and they have the most intricate and nuanced knowledge of the college, and they have the most direct role with shaping public perception. They're well-versed in crafting messaging for the public, and so they would kind of lead the Joint Information Center. Underneath that, there's several categories: information gathering, information dissemination, operations support, and liaisons, and these were what was taken into account was the number of staff in each office, how capable and qualified they would be, and how they would be able to best work in this function for a joint information center. The next section is always a large part of crisis communication plans. So identifying stakeholders is always important, as it helps to guide the messaging strategies, as well as to guide who the messages are for. And so, for example, again, since we're a college, the student body, parents of students are some of the largest stakeholders. But in addition, the employees at Shasta College are a very large part. So if there were a crisis, they would need to be informed, especially because they're frontline staff. They're the ones who are going to be answering questions to students and parents. But also, one of the stakeholders is just the community as a whole. So Shasta College is an integral part of the Reading community, and it helps with job growth. It helps be a place for jobs. It helps students be able to transfer to four-year universities. And so part of the reputation of Shasta College is tied to the reputation of Reading as a whole. And so those are all groups that should be considered during a time of crisis. Next, I wanted to create a reference guide as to how to direct public communications. So this begins with a section on media assets. So what I did was basically look at the media resources that are most used here in Reading, and as well as that we already have communications with. I also set out some guidelines, and so these are, if someone's not familiar, say if the marketing department is unavailable and someone has to give a press conference, these are just quick and easy tips for how to interact with the media and the kind of information that should be provided. I also created an example press release, and so this is meant to be something that could be very quickly used, replicated, adjusted, depending on the nature of the emergency. So in writing this, it follows the inverted pyramid style of writing, where basically the most important information always comes first, and then the details second, and any kind of background information is third, and third or next. And basically the reason for this is if a journalist is on a time crunch and they have to get out the story very soon, they should be able to read from the top down to see this is the information that the most people need to know first. I also created some strategies, so for how to best disseminate information. I just wrote down some more tips that people could use, as well as making a note that in a crisis, everything is time sensitive. Everything needs to be considered within the broader scope of what the timeline is going to look like. Of course, since it's 2019, I added a section about social media strategies and how to best use social media. And so social media can be very helpful before, during, and after a crisis. So of course, during a crisis, we've seen that social media can be very effective in terms of spreading the word. If there's an evacuation, it's often shared Facebook, Twitter. It's also it's important to monitor social media, because that's where the little conversations are happening. If people have questions, that's where they'll come. If people have criticisms, that's where they'll come. And then in addition, after a crisis has passed, social media can be very beneficial in terms of community building. When it comes to the post-crisis, it's also very important. So the first step is to let stakeholders know what's passed, what's going to be done about it, so the crisis doesn't happen again in the future, as well as community building. So again, social media can be used to just get the message out that we are a community, we're strong, and here's what we've done, and here's what we can do different in the future. Finally, also, I wanted to add a section about how to test this plan. So this was important because after each crisis, the plan should be revisited. We should make sure that it functions as appropriate. If there was some kind of crisis that no one anticipated and the plan didn't really help with, it should be adjusted to make sure that no matter what the crisis is, it is available. The plan is available as a resource. I did add one section that was just about sources. So these are web links that I use that could be important, that could be good for further reading and could be helpful for people who want to know a little bit more. But basically, overall, this was a crisis communication plan for the Global Education Center that I wanted to make sure was flexible and adaptable and could actually be tested. Thank you very much.